Quizmonsters. Can you guess these history questions correctly? Let's go! Who was the first president of the United States? George Washington. In what year did the Titanic sink? 1912. Who was the first woman to fly solo across the Atlantic Ocean? Amelia Earhart. What is the capital of France? Paris. Who wrote the Declaration of Independence? Thomas Jefferson. What ancient civilization built the pyramids? The Egyptians. Who was known as the Maid of Orleans? Joan of Arc. What year did World War II begin? 1939. Who was the famous civil rights leader known for the I Have a Dream speech? Martin Luther King Jr. Who discovered America in 1492? Christopher Columbus. What is the name of the ship that brought the Pilgrims to America? The Mayflower. Who was the last Tsar of Russia? Nicholas II? What was the name of the first manned moon landing mission? Apollo 11. Who was the British Prime Minister during World War II? Winston Churchill. What year did the Berlin Wall fall? 1989. Who painted the Mona Lisa? Leonardo da Vinci. What document ended the American Revolutionary War? The Treaty of Paris. Who is known as the father of history? Herodotus. What is the capital city of Italy? Rome. Who wrote the play Romeo and Juliet? William Shakespeare. Who was the first female Prime Minister of the United Kingdom? Margaret Thatcher. What event triggered World War I? The assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand. What was the main purpose of the United Nations? To promote peace and cooperation among nations. Who was the leader of the Soviet Union during World War II? Joseph Stalin. What is the name of the ancient trade route that connected China to the West? The Silk Road. Who was the first African American to play in Major League Baseball? Jackie Robinson. What year did the United States gain independence? (1776). Who was the first man to walk on the moon? Neil Armstrong. What was the name of the ship that carried the first settlers to Jamestown? The Susan Constant. Who was the famous scientist who developed the theory of relativity? Albert Einstein. Who was the Roman god of war? Mars. What was the primary religion of the Byzantine Empire? Eastern Orthodox Christianity. Who was the first woman to win a Nobel Prize? Marie Curie. What year did the American Civil War start? (1861). Who was the King of England during the American Revolution? King George III. What is the capital of Canada? Ottawa. Who was the famous leader of the civil rights movement in India? Mahatma Gandhi. What year did World War I begin? (1914). Who was the first president of South Africa after apartheid? Nelson Mandela. What year did the Cold War begin? 1947. Who was the author of the Communist Manifesto? Karl Marx. What ancient civilization is known for its city-states like Athens and Sparta? Ancient Greece. Who was the first female pharaoh of Egypt? Hatshepsut. What event is celebrated on July 4th in the United States? Independence Day. Who invented the telephone? Alexander Graham Bell. What was the main cause of the French Revolution? Social inequality and financial crisis. Who was the leader of the Nazi Party during World War II? Adolf Hitler. What is the capital city of Japan? Tokyo. Who was the first African American president of the United States? Barack Obama. What is the name of the famous wall in China? The Great Wall of China. Who was the first person to circumnavigate the globe? Ferdinand Magellan. What was the name of the conflict fought between the North and South in the United States? The Civil War. What famous document did Abraham Lincoln issue in 1863? The Emancipation Proclamation. Who was the British explorer who discovered Hawaii? Captain James Cook. What year did the United States enter World War I? (1917). Who was the famous artist who painted the Sistine Chapel ceiling? Michelangelo. What is the name of the famous trade agreement between Canada, Mexico, and the U.S.? NAFTA, North American Free Trade Agreement. What was the name of the first successful vaccine developed? Smallpox vaccine. Who was the ancient Greek philosopher who taught Alexander the Great? Aristotle. What year did the Great Depression begin? 1829. Who was the famous suffragette leader in the United Kingdom? Emmeline Pankhurst. What is the name of the period of cultural revival in Europe from the 14th to the 17th century? The Renaissance. Who was the famous Queen of Egypt known for her beauty? Cleopatra. What was the name of the first artificial satellite launched into space? Sputnik. Who was the first person to fly solo nonstop across the Atlantic? Charles Lindbergh. What was the name of the ancient Roman arena used for gladiator contests? The Colosseum. Who wrote the famous book 1984? George Orwell. What year did the Berlin Wall go up? (1961). Who is known for his theory of evolution? Charles Darwin. What was the name of the ship that brought the first African slaves to America? The White Lion. Who was the leader of the American Revolution? George Washington. What year did the first manned moon landing occur? (1969). Who was the king of the Franks who united much of Western Europe? Charlemagne. What famous wall separated East and West Berlin? The Berlin Wall. Who was the famous philosopher known for his Socratic method? Socrates. What year did the U.S. Constitution go into effect? (1789). Who was the first woman to receive a medical degree in the U.S.? Elizabeth Blackwell. What was the name of the first permanent English settlement in America? Jamestown. Who was the famous African-American abolitionist and speaker? Frederick Douglass. What year did the Vietnam War end? 1875. Who was the British monarch during World War I? King George V. What was the main cause of the American Civil War? Slavery. Who was the famous explorer who sailed for both Spain and England? John Cabot. What was the name of the first successful airplane? The Wright Flyer. Who was the last pharaoh of ancient Egypt? Cleopatra VII. What famous treaty ended World War I? The Treaty of Versailles. Who was the famous scientist who formulated the laws of motion and universal gravitation? Isaac Newton. What year did the U.S. enter World War II? 1941. Who was the famous female spy during World War II? Virginia Hall. What was the name of the project that developed the atomic bomb during World War II? The Manhattan Project. How many did you get right? Comment down below and make sure to like and subscribe.